Hi foliage family. If you don't know me, my name is Romani and I am mother of leafy boys, and today is going to be our part 3 of my houseplant tour. My full collection of around 200 plus with a mix of I feel like every kind of plant genus that you can think of under the sun. Today we are going to be looking at part 3, which will be the downstairs area of my house. So far we have gone through the plant room, the guest room, the rest of the upstairs area of the house, and the veranda. So the upstairs plants have all been done at this point. The only ones left to do is the downstairs area. So this space that I'm sitting in right now is actually where majority of the plants are kept in this downstairs space, because I keep most of my trixier plants, the ones I need to care a little bit more for, upstairs. Downstairs are usually my more low maintenance plants, and actually where I keep a lot of my caladiums as well, because they really love the bright light that they get in this section. So just like the first part of the video, the light that's coming through these windows is north facing in Brisbane, Australia. So they get really great light pretty much all year round. And again, the caladiums absolutely love that amount of light, but there are definitely quite a few different plants down here as well. I will also get to take you through where I have put all of the plants that I am going to be selling into one area. And it kind of looks like I own a plant shop in my house now. By the time this video comes out, it's more than likely that I've already done that market and these plants will be sold. I don't do them very regularly, and I don't sell plants online or anything like that. It's just, I propagate my plants a lot because I'm keeping them neat and tidy and trimming them. And it's nice to make back a little bit of the money that we spend on our very expensive hobby. So every now and then I'll get the propagations together if I have enough of them, and I will go and sell them at like a local market. Let's actually get into looking at some of the plants in my collection in this space. Oh, but before we get into it, I have to do the things. Please make sure that if you enjoy the video that you like and you subscribe. I'm very new to YouTube, so everything that you guys do counts. All of the interactions that you make definitely counts. Now we can get back to the video. Alright, so you can't really see me for this part, but what you are currently looking at is my windowsill that holds most of my beautiful caladium plants, and I'm going to bring them up so that you can see them sort of one by one. So we are starting off with this gorgeous plant here. Unfortunately, I actually don't know a lot of the names of my caladiums. Some of them came mislabeled, some of them were labeled as the ever amazing assorted foliage. You know, that means I have no idea what they actually are. If I can figure it out, I'll probably do a bit of a Google and I'll try and add what I think their names are at the bottom of the video. But if you are a caladium lover and you know what these caladiums are, please let me know. I had some really helpful people in my first video actually name some plants that I had never heard of before. All right, let's move on to another caladium. All right, so this one has been through a lot. This was one of my first caladiums. I do know that this one was sold to me as White Christmas, and I do feel like it is commonly known as the White Christmas. It's been through the ringer because it has been one of my most beautiful plants. It has been the biggest, like we're talking, the leaves on this one have been, it would cover my whole body at this point, like my upper part of my body here, it would have been as wide as my body was at one point. And it had really big, beautiful leaves. It hasn't quite gotten to that point in a couple of years, and I think that's just because I neglected it where it was in the previous house, but where it is now, it gets much better light. I feed it a lot more often. I feed it with a fertilizer called GT, or growth tonic, and it gets the foliage focus most of the time. So it's a very happy camper. They love a good feeding. Mine don't go as dormant. Please don't chuck yours out if it turns into a pot of soil. Just make sure that you water it a lot less and let it completely dry out. Because they do go dormant, especially if they're small. I find if I have a little baby caladium that only has 1 or 2 leaves, it will tend to go dormant in the winter times. But my big caladiums, I just find that they lose a fair few leaves, but they don't really die off completely if they're big caladiums. Again, I don't think this one came with any sort of label. It was just a, I'll go to the side so you can still see the light. It was a hybrid, and I believe they all said Noid on them, as in no ID. But they are just super stunning caladiums. And you can get so many different kinds of caladiums, honestly. But yeah, I do find they really don't want to dry out for the most part. I let them dry out till they're about here. Dry to about here, and then I'll water them again. I have them in trays as well where they can bottom soak, because they really just want to get fully saturated, but they will get yellowing leaves and they will rot if you overwater them. So do give them a break in between their waterings, and don't let them sit in water for more than 24 hours. I usually put that much water in the bottom of the tray, and this is a full tray on the windowsill, and then I let them sit in it overnight. Usually, because they're such thirsty gals, by the morning they have completely soaked that up and there is no water left in the tray. If there was water left in the tray, I would empty it out. I think someone called this one a butterfly plant at some time, but this one literally just says, I'll show you what I mean. They will say stuff like this, where it just says Caladium Noid. It's a bit sad because if anyone wants to buy the same plant, it's a bit hard to figure out which one you have to replicate that same kind. But keep in mind that caladiums will look very different when they're immature. All right, next up we have this absolutely stunning plant. I absolutely love the pink veining on this particular plant. This one is the next one in my collection. It is supposed to be variegated, but you're not going to see much variegation on this one. I think at the back there's like a tiny bit more variegation, but overall, unfortunately, this plant is just has super low variegation. Every now and then you'll get one like really pretty leaf, but for the most part, it doesn't have a lot of variegation at all to speak of. This one here is my problem child. I am not even going to attempt to tell you the name of this plant. I am, actually. It's Fibocaccia. I knew I wasn't going to be able to say it. I don't know why I even attempted. So this one just does the princess shoe thing, and I know it's because this plant really wants more humidity, which is crazy considering where I live, that this plant wants more humidity. Are you insane? I am currently sweating so much because of the humidity, but whatever, you want more, I get it. Don't get this plant if you don't live in a place that's super humid or you aren't willing to grow it in some sort of like greenhouse, because I can tell you it is not going to like where you live whatsoever. Oh my God. All right. I picked up the heavy one. I did it. It's heavy mainly because the pot is like full cement. It's a very, very pretty plant indeed. This is my gloriosum, just your regular green gloriosum. Again, I have it in a round pot. So if you watched part 2 of my plant tour, you'll know that I absolutely refuse to grow these plants in those rectangular pots because I think they're ugly. That's my opinion. So I liked mine to be in round pots, and I just chop them a lot. If you look inside the pot here, you'll actually notice that they're really short because I recently propagated them. So I took off the end parts and I just repotted in the growing sort of node sections. And it makes for a much fuller pot because you have so many sections that's been chopped up in here. It will often put off new shoots, so you'll have smaller and bigger leaves all in the same pot, which makes for that really like full, lush looking style. And it means that they've got, look how much room this one has to grow. It's here, here's all the way to here. Oh, the plate at the bottom just popped off and I almost dropped, the plate just popped off and I almost dropped the whole thing. Whew, my heart. Okay, there's heaps of room for it to grow. If it gets to the end, I'll just divert it to go around. It'll be fine. Woo! All right, so for the rest of the section here, I'm probably going to do handheld. So let's have a look at the very last one on this shelf that we haven't looked at, which is this one up here. This one unfortunately has lost its cover pot at one point when I've given it to another plant, but this is your Mandula pothos. It has some browning splotches on it and I've got it climbing, sort of wrapping around a stick that I found that I thought would be pretty for it to grow on. This super stunning plant here, I believe is actually a xanthosoma. It was a Caladium when I bought it, but I believe they reclassified the genus. Still kind of likes the same care requirements as a Caladium though, so I treat it basically like it is a Caladium, but it is a very easy grower and a super happy camper. This one here I've had a lot of questions on. Unfortunately, it is just a no ID. It's annoyed once again. But again, I believe someone's called it a butterfly, and someone else has also said that it kind of looks like a pink symphony. So if you like this kind of plant, look up the white butterfly Caladium and the pink symphony Caladium, and you might be able to find plants that look very similar to this. And if you can see right there, that, my friend, would be spider mites back to haunt me. Evil little spider mites. The next beautiful one here is called a Hilo Beauty. It's quite leggy. If I take a step back, it's a very leggy plant. I'm not quite sure why my caladiums that are right beside it don't seem to be reaching as hard as this plant is, but I've always found this plant just has like the longest stems. This one here is an unknown begonia to me. I actually have it growing in my garden, and that's how I came to own it. So I took some cuttings and it seems to be really happy. So an unknown, very cute begonia. This beautiful plant up here is, black band maranta, I believe, or silver band maranta. I can't find the label on it, so it's one of those. Moving on down, this one here is a Monstera. Ooh, it's not a Peru. It's the one that people confuse for a Peru, but it gets bigger leaves a lot faster. And I currently just have it growing up just a regular stake. Ooh, it's on an angle too. Nothing super fancy, just a regular stake. It's not really upsizing because it's not growing into anything, but it's also not downsizing. It seems pretty happy with its life. Also, I'm so sorry for the very like 80s carpet. It's the original carpet. We don't talk about that. This beautiful plant is a Monstera stanleyana albo. I think this plant 100% wants to grow up a stake. That's what it wants in its life. I 100% do not want to grow it up a stake, and that sort of becomes an argument between the two of us. But every time it gives me runners, I just chop the runners back. It will give me some new leaves eventually, or some more runners. I kind of don't care at the end of the day, and that's why it's ended up downstairs. This one here, let me bring it out. This one is a beautiful little ivy plant. I believe this is ivy camouflage. It's either super slow growing or I'm really bad at taking care of it. I've killed 1,000 ivies, so I'm doing my best. I put it in a pretty pot so I would hopefully take care of it, but yeah. These are just some cuttings of some other plants that I have in my collection. You know, parts of that burley marks that have reverted, little things like that. The next gorgeous plant that is a little bit hard to capture just because of how bright it is where it is a string of hearts or chain of hearts, but the variegated version. But I do kind of like the look of it when it's not too full, so you can actually see the pot design, because I think the pot design is also really pretty. Over on this side, it's actually a double hanger, which is really cool. So up here, so it's called a Syngonium Starlight, and it has this really pretty white variegation. I had it in some lower light, so you can see a fair chunk of it has kind of reverted, but I find that this one brings back the variegation on its own. This really pretty one down here, I believe it was sold to me as a silvery Anne, and again it was wrapping around a shelf that I had down here, but when I moved all my plants to be sold, I had to put them on the shelf that it was growing on. It lost a lot of its length and a lot of its fullness, but this is going to be its new spot from now on, I think. Looking down, you'll actually see I do have this one here. It's a little rock fig plant. Very pretty. I believe I actually got this one as like essentially a freebie with some plants that I bought at a nursery when they were closing down. This next plant here is a cross, and I can't remember. I know it's a cross between a varicosum, but I cannot remember what it is a cross between other than that. I will figure it out and I'll put it on the screen, but it is a new addition that I got at a big plant fair recently from Odd Spot Plants, and its backs have that like beautiful varicosum like red, and I just find it a breeze. It's a massive plant too, but a super easy grower so far. This one here is actually a Frydek. It's one of the only ones that I'm growing in pon. This is a chunk that I propagated when mine had bad spider mites and wasn't growing too well. Look, if you look closely, there might be a tiny bit of variegation in there. Yeah, that looks like it could be. I don't think it'll be super variegated, but at least it has come back. All right, so this corner is actually really hard to see just because of how dark and bright it is all at the same time. But we're gonna start with this hanging plane here, which is a beautiful Monstera Peru. I had it climbing, which is why it has such nice leaves. But now I'm going to let it trail. It's gonna get smaller leaves, it's not gonna be happy, but I really like the look of it in a trailing pot rather than a climbing. So I'm gonna let it happen. Over on this side here, you have your bog standard I guess like variegated pothos. I think some people call it snow queen. I don't think it's quite a snow queen. I think snow queens have to be much more variegated than this one is. But there are still some very pretty variegated leaves on here. So I will take it. This one here is a random cactus that I've had for a very long time, but it has some really cool variegation. This is probably the best section to see it. Beside it we have a little hoya here. It's the same as the one that I have upstairs, except this one is not variegated, and this was another one of those like really cheap ones that were tussed in for a nursery that was going out of business. This one is another domesticum. This was actually the first one that I had that completely reverted, but the chop seems to have worked. And it's starting, well, that leaf has been bent, hasn't it? It is definitely getting its variegation back. This leaf looks very, very sad. It has ants on it right now, which is fine because it had spider mites and the ants are dealing with it. There's those little ants. Oops, sorry ants. We will leave them to do the job because they come in and they eat all of the spider mites, or at least they help keep the spider mites in check for the most part. This one here is another cutting, but I didn't want to sell this one because I knew it had spider mites. So if it had spider mites, it unfortunately was not going to be sold. It stays in my collection until it is pest free. So this one will have to wait until I've managed to get it pest free before it goes on a plant shelf. This next one here, I believe is called a homoleonema. It's just your plain green form. I would love to get some of those really nice variegated ones that have the sectorial variegation. But for now, it is just like a really nice lush green plant that is pretty unproblematic to be in our downstairs space. The plant over in this corner is actually being kept away from all the others because it has a pretty disastrous case of scale. I wonder if you can see it. So you can see how awful the scale damage is on these plants. And again, it's because I don't check these as often. So when they get a pest, unfortunately, it becomes kind of disastrous. Alright, so this one here is a beautiful Sigonium mojito that I have growing beside the couch here. If you actually look closely, it has attached itself to the pole, so it is essentially staked up using a support beam that we have in our downstairs area. Again, this whole area is unrenovated, so I'm kind of using it to my advantage and, you know, kind of letting the plants grow a little bit wild. Next little cutie is this Dracaena here. Super odd Dracaena. I believe it's called Dracaena Florida Beauty. But I've never seen Dracaenas like this until I found it in a plant store one day, and now it's just been a staple. I love her. She is a true low light plant. Does not care where I put her. And I put her in the darkest of corners because of it. Alright, and this is pretty much our last section to look at. There may have been one or two like scattered plant that I've missed. Like I think I've missed my Matilde, but that's because it's kept off to the side because it had really bad mealybugs. So there's only 2 plants in this section that aren't ones that are going to be sold, that are ones that are mine, and there was just nowhere else for them to go in my collection. But for the most part, these are all plants that are going to end up being sold eventually and aren't mine. So because of that, they are pretty much double ups. I'm just going to do some really nice quick sweeping shots of the collection so you can have a look at it, and then we're going to wrap the video up. All right, so that is the end of my 200 plus plant collection. This is the final part. So thank you guys for everyone that encouraged me to continue making these videos and that asked for a part 2 and a part 3. I really hope you liked this a little bit shorter video. At least I hope it was shorter at the end of the day. There was lots of breaks in between because it is just been so stinking hot recently in Brisbane that I was really struggling to find a good time to film this where I wasn't going to be sweating. So thank you guys for coming along and watching the video. If there was any plants that you're a little bit more curious about and want to know a little bit more about, please let me know in the comments below, and I will see you again hopefully soon.